I said things about my female coworkers I never meant for anyone to hear. They heard every single word. And what happened next? Nobody predicted it. Not even me. The day everything cracked open. Here's the part that still makes my stomach drop every time I think about it. It was a regular Tuesday, the kind where nothing is supposed to go wrong. I was on a voice memo, just venting to myself, thinking I was alone in the break room. I had my lunch, a half-cold coffee, and apparently zero awareness of my surroundings. I said things about Priya being too controlling, about Layla never giving credit, about how Jess smiled at everyone's face and talked behind their backs. Real stuff, ugly stuff, the kind of honesty you save for your shower or your drive home when nobody's listening. The kind that lives in your chest and poisons you slowly if you never let it out. I didn't notice the Bluetooth speaker was still connected to the conference room next door, where all three of them were having a meeting. Every single word, broadcast, live, what I actually said and why it was complicated. Okay, stop right there. Before you cancel me in your head, just listen. Because here's the thing nobody ever talks about. The most damaging opinions aren't born from hate. They're born from frustration layered on top of admiration you never learned to express. I didn't think Priya was a bad person. I thought she was terrifyingly capable, and it made me feel small. Like I was always 2 steps behind someone who had already figured out what I was still trying to understand. I wasn't jealous of Layla's work. I was hurt that she never acknowledged mine. And Jess? Jess reminded me of every version of myself I'd buried to seem professional. The version that laughed too loud. The version that tried too hard. The version I'd spent years pretending didn't exist. The voice memo didn't reveal my hatred. It revealed my wounds. The problem? My coworkers didn't know that yet. And that gap between what I meant and what they heard nearly destroyed everything. The silence that followed was deafening. When I walked into that conference room to grab my charger, all 3 of them looked up at me. Nobody said a word. Priya's expression was completely blank. The scariest kind. Layla looked away immediately. Jess just smiled. And that smile was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen at work. I knew right then. They'd heard it. All of it. The charger felt like the heaviest thing I'd ever picked up. I walked back out like the floor was made of paper. I didn't sleep that night. I rehearsed apologies, reasons, explanations, none of them good enough. Every version sounded worse than the last. By 3 a.m., I had decided to quit before they could get me fired. I was writing my resignation letter when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Priya. 2 words. We need to talk. The conversation I was not ready for. The next morning, I walked into a small meeting room with all 3 of them sitting there. I had a whole speech ready, something carefully constructed and appropriately remorseful. I opened my mouth, and Priya held up her hand. She said, "Before you apologize, we need to be honest too." And I sat back down. What came out of that room in the next 40 minutes rewired something in my brain. Priya admitted she had been micromanaging because she was terrified of the team failing and blamed herself for everything. She said she'd been carrying that since a project collapsed 2 years before I joined. And nobody had ever told her it wasn't her fault. Layla said she struggled to give credit out loud because her previous boss had weaponized it against her, and she had never unlearned the fear. Jess said my comment about her smiling hit so hard because she'd spent her entire life hiding anxiety behind pleasantness and she was exhausted by it. She'd never said that out loud to anyone at work. Not once. They weren't defending themselves. They were handing me the other side of the story, the side I had never once asked for. The part nobody tells you about workplace honesty. Here's what I didn't understand before all of this. Frustration is just intimacy that got lost in translation. You don't get frustrated with strangers. You get frustrated with people you're close enough to expect something from. The irritation I felt toward Priya, Layla, and Jess wasn't indifference. It was an unspoken, unmet expectation of real connection. Think about that. When was the last time you got genuinely frustrated with someone you didn't care about at all? Exactly. You can't. The frustration itself is proof of investment. And I had been sitting in that office for 2 years, deeply invested in these women. In their opinions, their work, their energy, and I had never once told any of them that. Not directly, not in a way that counted. I had been performing professionalism so hard that I'd squeezed out every trace of actual human feeling. And then I was surprised when nothing felt real. We spend so much energy managing perceptions at work that we forget the people next to us are also managing theirs. Everyone in that office was performing something. Everyone was protecting something. And none of us had ever just stopped and said it out loud. What changed after that room? I want to be real with you, it wasn't a movie ending. Nobody hugged. Nobody cried. We walked out of that room and went back to work. The afternoon was still full of emails and deadlines and the same slightly too cold office air. But something had shifted permanently. Priya started CCING me on decisions instead of just delivering them. Layla mentioned my input in the next team call out loud in front of everyone. Jess stopped the performance smile and started actually laughing at things, awkwardly, genuinely, in a way that made her human. And I started asking questions instead of making assumptions. I started saying things like, "Hey, can you walk me through your thinking on that?" Instead of building entire stories in my head about why someone did what they did. It sounds small. Changed everything. A voice memo turned into the most uncomfortable, necessary, transformational conversation of my professional life. None of it would have happened if those speakers hadn't betrayed me. How many people in your life have you been quietly frustrated with? Not because you dislike them, but because you never told them what you actually needed from them. How many relationships are sitting in that gray zone between good and great, waiting for one uncomfortable, honest moment to unlock them? You don't need a rogue Bluetooth speaker to have that conversation. You just need to stop waiting for a perfect, safe, comfortable moment that is never going to come. Drop in the comments. Tell me one thing you've been holding back from someone at work. Not to embarrass yourself, not to vent, just to acknowledge it exists. Because if this story taught me anything, it's that the things we're most afraid to say are usually the things that need to be said the most. I'll see you in the next one.